moderators, welcome to this conversation. We're just waiting for some more people to jump on, and then we'll get started with Cynthia in a few minutes.
Okay, are we ready?
We are.
Rebecca and Pieta, are we ready?
I think we are.
Okay, and if you are joining us, please say hi to us in the comments. Rebecca's going to be monitoring the comments, and we're going to try to be really good about getting to questions or answering or responding to your comments. But welcome, everybody. And this is our first time doing coffee time with Masterminds. And the idea is to grab a cup of coffee, have a conversation that's going to last hopefully as long as your cup of coffee. So a few housekeeping items first. We will be on this for about 40 minutes. So we'll be leaving at about 11:10. We do encourage you to post your comments or your questions in the comment space on Facebook. And like I said before, this is our first time, so we're expecting some blunders. And yesterday we did a test and we haven't laughed that much in a really long time. So we plan to laugh a lot today. And so what's important though is joining the conversation. We did this on Facebook Live so that we can engage viewers and begin to have a conversation on what our future is going to look like. So please make your comments, type out your comments and let us know what you're thinking.
And even if people are watching in the replay, they should still write comments because we're going to be back next week and we'll address them then.
Yes, that's a really good point. So let's jump right in. I like this thing that we do at FIO Partners, where we open every meeting asking the question, what is your bright spot today? Or, because it's only 10:30, what has been your bright spot in the midst of this pandemic this week? So please take this time to put in the comments, what are you grateful for? What is something that made you feel joy again? And we're going to start with Rebecca and see, Rebecca, what is your bright spot?
Well, I actually enjoy being home with my family, and knock on wood, it hasn't been too chaotic for us here. It's nice to have everyone home and we're all safe, and also the sunshine and seeing all the leaves changing and the grass becoming green. So that's my bright spot.
Cool. All right. Pieta, what's your bright spot?
I think one of my bright spots has been Zoom calls with my parents.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, a lot of families getting together.
Yeah.
And you guys do weekly or a couple of times a week?
Yeah, at least once a week.
That's cool. That's really, really cool.
Lots of fun.
My bright spot occurred this morning when I was putting on my makeup. I put on the good makeup because I went back to the store and I bought like cheaper makeup so I could wear that every day since nobody sees me. And today I was like, I'm putting on the good stuff, and it felt really good, and I moisturized and all that good stuff. I already had a bright spot, but thank you. And hopefully this will encourage you to start conversations with bright spots, because even though this is hard, and for many of us, we are really struggling, it's a good way to center yourself and to realize that we still have things to be grateful for. What are we doing, right? So there are many conversations happening, whether they're on Zoom, webinars, and Facebook Live, or even LinkedIn, where people are talking about how to work from home, how to deliver your services from a distance, how to apply for federal funding during this time. But what the three of us have found, that there's a conversation that's missing. When this is all done and the quarantine has been lifted, how do we adjust to our new normal? Or what I heard somebody say yesterday in a phone call, our better normal, because we hope to be better as a result of this. In other words, how can we use the opportunity created by this disruption to envision the world we're going to build? And in the next 30 minutes, we want to begin that conversation, and then in the coming weeks, dig deeper. And the idea is to have all of you join us in this conversation as well. So let's start with introducing my two dear friends and well-respected colleagues. We're going to start with Pieta.
I am Pieta Blakely, and I am the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting. I help mission-based organizations measure their impact, and I particularly serve the organizations that are committed to helping build thriving communities.
Nice. Thank you, Pieta. Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and creator of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. I've taught 6,004 students how to write grants that get grant funding.
Rebecca, did you say 6,004?
Yeah, it's a funny
Rebecca
number.
is the detail-oriented member of our group.
Yeah. And as data people, Pieta and I really enjoy that exact number there.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. If you're not measuring it, it didn't happen. Rebecca, what were you saying? I didn't hear you.
Oh, so every time I teach, I say, I've taught this many students, and then we count around the room, and you should have seen the look on the woman's face when she was the 6,000th. It's like she won the lottery, but so it's fun.
Did you have a prize for her?
I taught her grant writing, and
That's awesome. And I'm Cynthia Rojas, and I have the pleasure of working with Field Partners, which is a consulting firm that specializes in strategic planning, mergers and acquisitions, and I specialize in helping organizations work through change and really large initiatives. And so this is something I've been studying for a long time and working through. And so then the pandemic happened and I realized, wow, everyone is going to be going through change. So it's an interesting time. One thing that I have been thinking about is this idea of leading through a crisis, right? And the way you lead when you're not in a crisis is very different when you do so during this time. A lot of leaders tend to still practice managing while leading. And many of us do that because we are under-resourced or because we worked our way up and we like managing and doing tasks. But the way you lead during a crisis cannot be the same way you used to lead.
Mm-hmm.
It is so important right now for you to get on that balcony at 30,000 feet and begin planning and strategizing for what's to come. Your staff and your organization depends on that. And if you are managing the response or you're managing the day-to-day because you want to feel useful and you feel somehow responsible, know that your senior leadership team or your managers should be dealing, and you should give them the autonomy to work through dealing with the response or responding to the issues on the ground. You as a leader should be strategizing and thinking, what is this going to be like when the quarantine is lifted? Because while there is no debate that this is disruptive, what's to come is another disruption. And that's when we lift everything and we go back to work. And it's not going to be like we're going to go back and like nothing happened. We are looking at a new normal, a new way of existing, a better normal, as I learned yesterday. And so how do we start to plan that now so that leaders can lessen that disruption in a much better way? So we have, again, this is our first conversation, and what we're planning to have is a series of conversations. So use those comments to either tell us what is it that you're doing to plan for post-COVID, or what are some things that you're realizing you need to start planning now that we hopefully have you thinking about it. One of the things that may have gone to the wayside, especially if you're running a nonprofit organization, may be monitoring your data. It's been about 5 weeks and you've needed to get laptops for your staff, get them set up at home, deal with what are the true working hours and all that stuff. But you probably still have grants. Some of you are still running programs. Many of you are still running programs. And so your funders deserve to know what's happening and what is the impact that you're having. Pieta, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of organizations are in crisis response mode, and they are either paring down a program or creating a new program, and they're thinking of it as a temporary adaptation. But I really like what you said, Cynthia, about like maybe we are just living in the future now. And how can we learn from what's going on right now? One of the things that I think is really valuable is that we're paring back, right? Everybody in their personal lives and their organizational lives is pared back to what's really essential. And it's a very useful exercise for us to think, how can we take that minimalism and commitment to showing up into the future? And I think the other thing we're doing is we are testing a lot of assumptions that we might not have been aware of. We are testing the assumption that participants had to come to our site to engage. And so let's actually think about this as an active experiment. What is gained when we let people not physically come to our site to engage with us? What is the opportunity here in terms of reaching wider audiences or showing up for people in different ways? Let's not assume that we're just going to abandon this when things go, quote, back to normal. Let's actually test this as a new way of operating and consider what about it we're going to bring forward into the future. So now is the most important time to be collecting data. The other thing I would say is if you are paring back your data collection right now, really focus on equity. We know in times of crisis that the most vulnerable and marginalized get left behind. So the other way to ensure that we're really showing up for the communities we need to serve is through collecting good data.
Sophia,
yes.
Lauren, she has a question. She brings up a good point. She asks, how might this crisis serve as an opportunity for NPOs to simplify and focus their strategies? Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. Good to see you. So I didn't realize how much extra stuff was built into program design until recently. And I teach organizations to build logic models, and I have been so cavalier about that inputs section of the logic model. And I remember standing in rooms and saying, well, yeah, you have rooms and you have teachers and you have computers, so you just document that. We were so naive. So here we are in a situation where we don't have those things and we're still functioning, right? So what an interesting opportunity to look at what we actually need and also to reverse our thinking. When I used to work in direct service, particularly with individuals experiencing poverty, we were very focused on the ways that they showed up for us and a lot less focused on the way that we as the staff and managers of programs showed up for those communities. And
Pieta, that's an excellent point, because when we find that people are not attending our programs and services, oftentimes it's not because they're not showing up on purpose, it's because we're not offering it at times that are convenient for them.
It's because we didn't give them any other way to give us that feedback that we're not meeting their need, right? So we think of attendance as like a mark on them. It's actually a quality measure on us, right? So now we actually have to be really thoughtful about how we show up, and we have to find other mechanisms to meet those needs. And I think it's doing a great thing in moving the onus onto the program managers and staff and away from participants.
I think that's great. Pieta, you said something that really struck me. You said we should be collecting our data now, but also collecting it in the new way that we're providing the services.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, right? Because the process, and you are an evaluator, so process evaluation, is just as important as outcome evaluation. And so
it's probably more important.
Right, yeah, because it tells you how well you're doing or not.
Yeah.
But when you say test assumptions, what you're saying is document your process, see who's showing up, see how well you're doing, so that when you create a new way of existing, you have data to back you up, especially if you have board members and you have to go through your board for, big programmatic changes.
Right. And I mean, what are the opportunities here? Like, is it possible that we don't need to manage real estate? Is it possible that we don't need as much space as we've been occupying and paying for? I mean, maybe there are completely different ways of thinking about the service that we offer. Maybe there are opportunities to make it more responsive and nimble and adaptive than it has been.
Yeah.
We have another remark. I may be mispronouncing, but PR, is that your name? How I pronounce your name? Says, it's interesting. My work is quite different, but I'm finding that these principles are even helpful for managing a household and family, especially in times of crisis.
Yep.
Oh.
Didn't you say that, Rebecca, about your household a few weeks ago? You said, we're really focused on family and spirituality right now. Like, we've just paired right. All the extra stuff is gone, and we've just paired right back to our family values.
Fair. I love that. I love that.
And I think organizations are doing that too, and it's a great thing.
It is. Well, so we're going to be simpler. There's an opportunity to be simpler. What a concept.
Yep.
Rebecca, you said something in one of our conversations a long time ago that has always stayed with me. Mm-hmm. You constantly warn that when you are operating within a crisis, you do not want to be in a crisis yourself. And we've talked a lot about self-care of leaders, but also organizations who are serving vulnerable populations need to also understand that if they're in constant crisis mode, they don't get to serve their people as best as they can. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And then how did people begin to think about fundraising in the future when they're trying to figure out the stimulus package?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And we have had quite a few conversations. So as nonprofits, and my background, I've been an executive director of nonprofits, program director, health roles as case managers, educator. So I'm very familiar with the internal operations. And one thing that we always try to keep in mind is that we serve people who are experiencing crisis or hardship. We can't let the external influences impact us as the leaders of those nonprofits, as the doers of the work. Because if we're operating from a place of crisis to help people in crisis, it's just going to be complete chaos. And we raise funds through grants and fundraising, other development avenues, so that we can help people through crisis. So as hard as it is, we have to hold ourselves together inside. And to your point earlier, Cynthia, about doing some of the work to support the internal infrastructure, that's especially important every day, but during times of disruption. Because we won't be any good to the people that we're trying to serve if we can't be good to ourselves inside to try to hold all of that together. So, there is no certainty in times of crisis. We're operating not necessarily from a place of reactivity. We're operating from a place of, okay, what is the situation? What support do we need, financial or otherwise, to respond to the situation? And what is our strategy to deliver upon that? And that's essentially what a funder wants to know from us when we're applying for a grant. We're presenting a need in our community, and we're asking a funder for their investment to help us offer some resolve to that crisis. And how we do that, we have to be intentional about how we do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm also struck, Rebecca, about how you've taught me in the last economic crisis, I think you talk about, or maybe it was post 9/11, you were leading an organization and you got an influx of referrals soon after the crisis. And you constantly remind your organizations and the people you work with, plan for that influx that may come once things settle down. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's that's something leaders should be having on the top of their minds is when you open your doors again and you can provide all the services or more services, what is that going to look like? Want to talk about that, Rebecca?
Absolutely. So I was an executive director during the recession that we had.
Mm.
And so I thought, okay, right now we're in crisis mode because we had, lucky for us, we had 2.5 FTE positions vacant when that all hit. So we chose not to fill those roles. And that actually saved us from having to let go or lay off other people on our team, because our current caseload, we were already carrying the work of those 2.5 missing FTEs on top of what we were already doing. And then the crisis hit, and now we have this influx of referrals, many from people who have never accessed services like the ones we were providing in the past. So we are balancing and tipping the scales already from a place of, I don't want to say deficit, but we all came together as a team and we were helping each other and leaning on each other for that extra support. And then we were preparing as best we were able to provide those services to those additional referrals coming in. And then we relied heavily upon reaching out to our collaborative partners to share some of that referral responsibility, because we knew that we couldn't do it all ourselves. And if you try to over provide when you are under-resourced, you could be letting a whole host of people down. So you really want to be transparent about what you're able to offer. And if you can't offer it, then find other partners who can help you so that those people aren't left, behind. They're not left without. And, planning for that in the future when all of it kind of resolved, and it took many years to resolve that previous recession, but planning for what do we do in the case of those influxes again? And are we going to be able to manage that sizable caseload when this is all over and we go back to normal? Because what we don't want to do is say, okay, well, this is over. Now you have to go somewhere else and we're going to go back down to our regular case size. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of conversation that you have to have inside, but also share that through transparency on the outside.
I'm so glad you made that point about engaging with partner organizations and other community assets, because I think that is such an advantage when your program has pared down to its essentials and to its core competencies, to partner with other organizations effectively and powerfully.
I also, if it's okay, Cynthia, I'd like to make another point. This is actually a scenario. So, and I know we might get to this later, but while it's on top of my mind, I don't have a sticky note for my parking lot right now.
You have a cool whiteboard, though.
So one of the things that I like to try to do is, out of the box thinking, right? So how can we share our mission with the world in different ways to draw a bigger audience when we're experiencing a bigger demand for our services, like what we discussed with this recession and the influx of referrals? So one of the things that we did was we would send out information about our services. We had a diaper bag, a clothing cabinet, to the news outlets. We send them out to press releases, to newsletters, etc. And what happened was we got so much of a response, even though we were experiencing hardship in our community, that we have an overflow of the amount of diapers and clothing and the amount that people wanted to give. And we underestimated that potential, not only because we just were not expecting it because of the hardships everyone was experiencing. And so what we did was we just happened to have this anonymous donor reach out to us, and he said, I will match dollar for dollar up to $10,000. For every dollar you receive donated, I'll match it up to $10,000, and I'll give you 6 months to do it. Because when we got such an influx of supplies to our site that we then were saying, we don't need any more supplies. It would be better if you were able to contribute as a donor, a donation to our fund so that when our supplies got low, when this is over, we could purchase more supplies. We met that match within 5 days. And he
Oh, wow.
like, how's it going? And I said, you're not going to believe this. But not only did we raise the 10,000, I think we raised something like 16 or 17. He matched the whole thing. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow.
Wow.
That's a great story.
Don't underestimate that people are willing to give right now. It's just positioning your organization and letting your donors and stakeholders know what you're doing right now, and letting them know that their support is still, equally as important, if not more so. And reach out to them, communicate with them, and try to continue that momentum of support, because everybody needs it right now. And lend your support back to the people who are your stakeholders and your donors, and ask them, how can we help you? We should all be giving in the time that we're also receiving as, recipients of donation.
Yeah, I think, and to go back to the influx issue, I read an article yesterday written by Cornell Wright, who is really well known in the New Haven area, and we should bring him on the show. He wrote this article about flow. Let me make sure. Flow problem theory. There's actually a theory about this and a mathematical equation that helps organizations manage flow. And it didn't occur to me how important this was. I mean, I hear you say it all the time, Rebecca, and there's a part of me that says, okay, that's a really good idea. But he broke it down to, this is what you should be doing now, because the flow could be equivalent to a tsunami post-COVID. So really, really good thinking. There was another thought that I had, but it just left my head. Do we have any comments or questions?
Yeah.
So do you want to?
Sure. So Karen says, good discussion. Providers have to think about the behaviors and the mindset to get through this first, so they can be of service to all.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So taking care of you before, as you start planning to take care of others is what I'm hearing.
And Rosanna says, this is a great discussion. She had to leave us, but she's coming back next time, so that's great. Welcome back. Next week we'll be here again, so that's excellent. And Lauren says, this is great information for NPOs. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
She appreciates the points we've made about the use of data to understand what is actually needed to provide services like space, and also opportunities to leverage external resources and engage in partnerships. This is excellent, Lauren. Thank you.
Yeah, we also have our email addresses up on the screen in the bar right below us. In case you want to email us, if you have any questions, if you have ideas on conversations, topics that we should bring up, we are more than open to those. Again, this is a series of conversations that we will be having on Fridays at 10:30, at least next Friday at 10:30. We will be here, and if we change the date, we
Friday at 10:30 Boston time.
Yes, Boston time.
and where can people find this conversation if they happen to be watching a replay and they want to make sure they're here live next week? They can follow you, Cynthia, on Facebook.
Yes, yeah. I will be posting on Facebook and LinkedIn. Pieta, where will you be posting?
I will be sharing on my business page on Facebook, the Blakely Consulting page, and in the group, Data Informed Programs. And Rebecca?
So I will be sharing on my LinkedIn page. I have 2, Rebecca Tuttle and then Grant Right Now. Also on my business Facebook page, Grant Right Now. And also in my group, Go Time Grant Writers. If you want to join the group while you're here in the conversation today, we would love that. Cynthia, I just wanted to ask quick. So because we have our email addresses there, and I'll probably post them in the comments as well, can you send that article to us so that we can send it back out to our friends and colleagues and family who's watching right now?
Oh yeah, it was a great article. Will do.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, and folks should continue to put their comments and questions on this link, wherever you're watching it, and suggestions for future conversations, suggestions for future guests.
Yeah,
we
no,
appreciate
we
all of
definitely
that.
want to invite people. I do have one thing. We have a couple of more minutes before we say goodbye. Rebecca, it's always been my experience that most funders, if not all of them, but many funders want to know what's happening. They want to understand how their investment is helping create impact. And right now, there are a lot of foundations, thankfully, who have pivoted in a way that they're supporting organizations through the crisis. But would it be an interesting conversation to go to a funder and say, we are planning for when this is over to what are we going to look like as an organization? What is, to Peter's point, what are the data points that we're going to be looking at? What's the work that we're going to be focused on? And can you fund some planning time for that? Is this a good time to have that conversation with funders?
So I have spent, since this all began, in fact, a couple of days before our state went into social distancing mode, I started signing up and listening to as many philanthropy webinars, calls, opportunities for engagement as I could to learn exactly what foundations and philanthropists are doing all over the country in response to helping nonprofits and other groups seek support, emergency support as a result of this pandemic. And I think that right now, to ask them for support outside of their current priorities could do one of two things. And I cannot speak for philanthropists. I'm not trying to take their voice. But what I know as a grant writer is that I would probably respond to their current priorities, their current calls to action, the way that they've outlined them. And then once you build that relationship with them and you start putting into practice what it is that your support that you've received from them is going to do for people in the immediate, I think once there's a little bit more calm to this, it might be a good time to go back and have those conversations. But for now, it might, I don't know, guys, off the record, it might demonstrate that you have a lack of focus of where we need to be right now.
Okay.
And so you really, and I can't speak for philanthropists, but while you're planning ahead and you're coming at that conversation from a place of good and honesty and you're thinking ahead, I think right now people are in such crisis mode and they've really done a lot to organize their efforts the way that they have. So I think participating with philanthropists the way they're currently calling us to do is probably what we should be doing right now. And
that's awesome.
Have those conversations prepared for later, absolutely. And build upon them as you receive their support and implement some of that work, build that into your conversation later on.
Yeah.
I would probably just, follow their calls to action.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. That's great advice. Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to check in on the comments, but also see if you guys have some closing comments and maybe talk about what other conversations you think we will be having on this platform. Peter, you want to go first while Rebecca looks through the comments?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I have been thinking about a lot lately is the humble logic model as a tool for organizational change. And I really want to encourage program managers as well as organizational leaders to pull out those documents. They are in some ways what's essential, right? And your program logic models should be talking to your mission in a way that make it real clear what you can cut away now and what you can't. So I think that's one thing that I'm really thinking about organizations bringing into the post-COVID future is living logic models for programmatic change. I think that there are a lot of opportunities here that I want to encourage organizations to think hard about. For example, now that we have let go of the idea that people need to go physical places to participate in things, what opportunity does that bring up, for example, for diversity and inclusion? Now that we see how many people are working and parenting simultaneously, does that make us think about working parents in a different way and how we can meet their needs in a different way? I think that there's a lot of exciting, rich opportunity to bring forward here. And I want to make sure that people are documenting it, because otherwise it gets lost. Right?
Yeah. You're always reminding us, those who may not be able physically to leave their home and have been left out of the workforce.
Right.
Now,
for years,
yeah,
we let them
they can join us now.
And then, right. Once, sadly, once the majority has that problem, we realize, it's completely workaroundable, and there's no reason that everybody can't work from home.
You're right.
Yeah.
I just want to welcome Melissa. She says, great conversation. Thank you. Jill.
Thank you, Melissa.
Nicole just joined us. We have quite the party here, girls. I think
nice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you,
Rebecca,
everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any final messages or some conversations that you hope we have in the future in regards to funding and planning and all that good stuff?
Well, I think show up here with us every week. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to engage a lot. And now is the time to take action, to plan and go through the motions of what does it look like when we all get out of this, and what are some strategies that I can build and use while we're all going through this. I have pivoted some of my teaching to include that in my grant writing education with my clients and my students, and even with the coaching clients that I have, because grant writing is going to look much different when we are out of this than it does before we came into this. And I can tell you that just from, I am actively writing every single day for my clients, and we've done some COVID response grants from emergency funding requests. And, we're already planning for what does that look like after, and what do we need to do right now. So if you can make the investment in yourself and your organization and try to get as much knowledge as you are able throughout this, then that's going to be powerful for all of us as we move through it and what we do next steps as a result of it. So please join us again. We have quite a few topics in the pipeline that we'd like to discuss, but also share with us. You have our emails. Mine is rebecca@grantrightnow.com. And let us know what you want to talk about. And if you want to be a guest on our mastermind coffee time, all you need is a coffee mug. So, come on in. So really,
that's awesome.
I think I speak for all three of us when I say that our intention to do this is just to bring support to the communities in which we live and we work and we serve. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yes, share our learnings as we continue to have conversations with many of the organizations we are working with. And I also want to, in closing, echo what Rebecca said. Join us next week at 10:30. And to continue the conversation, email us if you have some ideas or you have some comments that you want to share with us. My hope is that I can share some of the learnings of leading during a crisis and what your leadership should look like or needs to look like when people come back into the office or come back into the space that you were in pre-COVID. And what does that look like? And there are many conversations that need to be had. For instance, and I think Pieta brought this to my attention a couple of weeks ago, we now have new insight about our staff, right? We are in their homes, even if it's just through Zoom. That everybody knows I have a dog because he wants to be in the Zoom conversation. You probably did.
Next week, everybody will bring their dogs.
Yes,
Would love to
yes.
have
So now that you have this insight, what do you do with that? So even your staff is going to look different. And so those are the things that I also want to bring to the table. So we're a couple of minutes over, but I have to say, this is why I hang out with these two ladies, because they're smart and they're awesome. And our hope is that you got something out of this and that you'll join us and share this information with others so that this audience builds and we get greater engagement. But thank you. Thank you for having a cup of coffee.
everybody.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.